Thank you, Channing, and thank you all for being here. I'm very happy that I've got some colleagues in government here as well, and I want to point out Senator Josh Miller, who is a great advocate for progressive causes and a great environmentalist in the Rhode Island State Senate, and Ray Hull, representative, who I knew from his law enforcement days, and now he represents Providence in the House of Representatives. I'm delighted that you both are here, and I appreciate both of your hard work. And I'm very honored to be following my senior senator to this podium, because Jack is a really impressive environmentalist. As I said, we were at the press conference the other day calling on a stripping of the subsidies to the big oil companies. In the first 3 quarters of this year, they made over $100 billion. To be specific, $101 billion. Not revenues, profit. So why on earth they need to go into the pocket of the American taxpayer for additional subsidy is economically without any possible justification. But the old saying in politics is if you can, you will. And they can because they have built up a very strong constituency in Washington that we see working for their interests every day. And that has turned Washington, D.C., and specifically the Capitol building, into one of the 2 or 3 last places on Earth where climate change is still denied. Maybe Exxon's boardroom, maybe some fanatic right-wing group's headquarters, and the U.S. Capitol. Those are the places. And it makes it very, very frustrating, and it gives us a lot of work to do. But as we do it, having Jack Reed there is very important because he sits on the Appropriations Subcommittee. Indeed, he chairs the Appropriations Subcommittee that does the budget for the Department of Interior and for the Environmental Protection Administration. So when the people over on the other side of the Capitol building send over these budget bills that strip out enforcement of the Clean Air Act, that their latest stunt is going to be to attack the transport rule. The transport rule is what allows a polluter to be regulated for the consequences of their pollution in other states. Guess what, folks? We're that other state. We don't produce significant pollution here in Rhode Island. You could shut off every engine, every boiler, shut down every factory, turn off every car in Rhode Island. We would still not be a state in air quality compliance because there is an absolute battery of coal plants in the Midwest, down the Ohio Valley, through Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Ohio, that have, instead of putting scrubbers on their smokestacks, built taller smokestacks. So the same pollution now gets jetted higher up into the atmosphere and catches the winds that predominantly come towards us. And that is why on a wonderful, sunny Rhode Island morning, driving into work, you got the radio on, and the drive time radio disc jockey will say, today is a bad air day in Rhode Island, and you should keep your infant children inside, and if you are a senior, you should stay inside, and if you have a breathing disability, you should stay inside, and if you are not one of those people and go outside, you should not exercise too energetically, because the air isn't good to breathe, because so much of what they put up in the Midwest out of their coal plant stacks has reacted with sunshine on the way over, turned into ozone, and now dropped a blanket of ozone into Rhode Island that we can do nothing about. And the other party in the other house is going out of its way to lift that rule so that we can continue to enjoy those bad air days in Rhode Island that we are in no position to do a single thing about. So it's a very, very frustrating situation, and we have a lot of work to do, and I want to applaud all of you for your efforts to solve the problem of the graph that Channing showed. Because the consequences of continuing that upward spiral are very, very significant. And we can go through a million ways in which they're significant. Jack went through a bunch of them. I'm going to focus just on one. And I'm going to focus on one because we are the ocean state. So the oceans are a, I think, particularly dangerous vector for our oil pollution and carbon pollution. We have spent our life as a species within a fairly narrow bandwidth of carbon concentration in the atmosphere, 170 to 300 parts per million. It's gone back and forth between those two lines, but it stayed within those lines for 8,000 centuries. 8,000 centuries is a pretty long time. There are lots of very good historians here at Brown, and they will tell you that 800,000 years is a very long time. Indeed, we've only been doing agriculture as a species for about 10,000 years. 800,000 years ago, it's not clear we'd yet figured out fire. We were primitive creatures, and our entire development as a species has happened within that 170, 300 parts per million bandwidth, and we have bounced out of it. We are at 390 and headed out. We are past the chatter strip and off the highway and going. And it is a dangerous place to be because the ocean absorbs that extra carbon. And when it does, it turns acidic. And we are now at a stage where the latest report by the ocean scientists is that our carbon load and our ocean acidification levels are pointing in the same direction that we saw before the great mass ocean extinctions, not of 800,000 years ago, but of 51 million years ago and 255 million years ago. We are replicating the disasters of geologic time, and there is clear evidence. I think today's news was that this past year was the worst for carbon emissions ever. We've just dumped the biggest load of carbon from oil and coal and petroleum products into our atmosphere ever as a species. So that little notch you saw going down in the graphs, that was the bad economy. That wasn't anything we were doing right. That's going to turn right back up again as the next year's data gets added to it. And as that piles up, it drives the acidification of the ocean. And an acid ocean is a bad place for the little animals that are the bottom of the food chain and that have little calciferous shells. Let's just put it this way. You're not in a really good environment if you are soluble in it. And if the bottom of the food chain is to fall out in the ocean, the entire food chain collapses with it. And when you consider how much of our protein humankind gets from the ocean and how important it is as a resource to us, we are playing with some very, very dangerous sources. So getting behind the sort of things that will, your cupboards that will go up and turn parking lots into solar arrays, the Newport biodiesel folks who are getting us off of oil and onto vegetable oil and recycling it, the bioprocess algae folks here in Rhode Island who are actually growing algae fuel in wonderful plants that are a twofer. Not only do you grow algae fuel that doesn't cause the kind of pollution, but you're stripping carbon dioxide out of other plants to feed the algae as you grow. So there's a lot of technology that can get behind this. Rhode Island is showing considerable leadership in this area, and it is a huge win for us when we get there. So I will continue to fight as hard as I can to make sure that, Albie, your electric cars are a big part of the solution too. I want to appreciate what you all are doing. The thing is, if we're making our own fuel out of algae, if we're making electric cars and batteries here that we're plugging into electricity that's generated by wind and solar here, we're in control. We are no longer importing instead of exporting, and we are no longer subject or nation. And the idea that we would allow them to control the debate in our country as to what direction our energy future will go is a very poor idea. But it's an idea that I live in down in Washington, D.C. right now, and the best way, I think, to get around it is to have you all continue with your advocacy on the one hand, but also your technical development, so that as these new technologies come to market, they simply make the old fuels obsolete. And that time will come, and I hope it will come before the damage that we've done to our planet from releasing that much carbon into our atmosphere in so short a time really comes home to roost. So bless you for your work. If I can be helpful, or my office can be helpful in any way, please do not hesitate to call on me. I feel very strongly about this and will do virtually anything that you can suggest to try to help advance the cause and advance your own solutions to this problem. So thank you all very much, and Shannon, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. We'll now invite up to the front